Homeschoolers tend to be understandably choosy about the books they bring into their homes. So it's my joy to have back on the program today a faithful and very talented Catholic mystery writer with a new book your children are sure to love. Attorney and homeschooling dad Antony Kolenc is here to tell us about the latest Harwood Mystery.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to join our channel. Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Mladinich. Today we're talking with Antony Kolenc about his latest Harwood Mystery novel. So much fun. These are so good. Adults, you're going to love them too. Antony Baron Kolenc is the author of the Harwood Mysteries, an inspirational medieval fiction series for youth that has won 8 major book awards. He's also the host of the youth-related radio show and podcast, The Shepherd's Pie. He's a retired Air Force officer and he currently teaches at Ave Maria School of Law. Antony is also a columnist for Practical Homeschooling magazine. He and his family live in Jacksonville, Florida, and I have permission to call him Tony today. You can all find him at antonykolenc.com. I have a few other links, too, that we'll talk about in the show notes. Welcome to the program, Tony. It's so good to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we always have fun. We've known each other a long time from the Catholic Writers Guild, and you've just served so faithfully in that organization. I really appreciate you. But you've also been really hard at work the last several years, and you have found something that very few Catholic fiction writers ever really successfully cultivate, and that's a great relationship with your publisher, Loyola Press. Would you mind just starting us off? We want to praise the good work that they're doing.
I do. I love Loyola Press. They took me on, and hired some great editors to help make a good series. I think a much better series. The artwork. I mean, I'll show you some of the pictures of the books as we go along, but the artwork on the covers, from the typesetting to the marketing, they've really been wonderful to work with. And we've signed on. Actually, book 5 is already at Loyola being edited, and I think we're about to sign on for book 6. So I'm just really thrilled that they've been kind of making my Harwood Mysteries dream come true.
Oh, that makes me so happy. That's just delightful. Really want to encourage everybody, check out these Harwood Mysteries and do shop Loyola Press. And if you can, shop them directly. Anyway, so tell us about this wonderful emerging series. We've got book 4 in your hands. We're going to talk about that today. I've read some of these books and really loved them. They really, truly are page turners, but they're so encouraging. There's just something so light and beautiful and Catholic about them. Too many beginning authors kind of try to force an agenda and get preachy, and they lose that beauty of storytelling, but yours have not. So just step us into the series and some of the overarching themes and elements of the Harwood Mysteries.
Sure. It's 12th century England, and my main character, Zan, is at a Benedictine abbey where he's been orphaned because bandits attacked his manor. And so we kind of get the setting of, the feudal system. We see, my character's just a serf, a peasant boy who basically loses his family. And now he's living with the monks at the abbey. And there's a nearby nunnery where the nuns live and where his little friend Lucy lives. And they're both around 11 years old at the start of the series. And Shadow in the Dark is the first book in that series. So that kind of, I'm showing you the cover now, but that sort of shows you, in that series, in that book, we introduce the characters and they have to solve a mystery related to this kind of angel of death figure that seems to be roaming around the abbey grounds at night. But at the same time, we're kind of doing a lot of historical world building on what was going on in 12th century England at the time. And then the story kind of progresses, several months further in the haunted cathedral where Zan and Lucy wind up traveling to Lincoln and they have to solve this mystery of, is there a ghost of a little girl that's haunting the cathedral there? And that's where I introduce my other main girl character, Christina, who takes the full spotlight in book 4. I'll talk about in a second. And then in book 3, we go back to Harwood Abbey in the Fire of Eden, and Zan and Lucy wind up going to this priory where there's a jewel that's stolen. And so book 3 is sort of like a jewel theft, who done it. And one of the characters, this kind of magician that on the cover of the book looks like a Gandalf a little bit from The Lord of the Rings. He's kind of one of the sinister characters sitting out there. And then book 4 takes us back to Lincoln. And that's the Merchant's Curse, and that's the one I'm showing you right now for those who are watching this. You can see on the cover there's a witchy woman who sort of is the one who may or may not have cursed the uncle to Zan's business partner. And Zan and Christina, you can see their little heads up here on the cover. They are, like I said, Christina's the main character. And so Zan and Christina are basically trying to figure out, what is going on? Is this a real witch? Did she really curse this guy? He's dying. How can we save his life? And there's also kind of a really interesting historical issue going on in book 4, because this is set in the time of King Henry II, who really starts the Plantagenet dynasty that goes on for hundreds of years. But this is the very end of his reign, and there's all these he has all these sons who have been rebellious. And there's this whole subplot about whether, Zan gets dragged into this situation where he's being treated as a traitor to the king. So as he's trying to solve this mystery of the witch's curse, he also is avoiding the sheriff's men who think that, he might be a traitor. And so there's lots of fun things going on in the series, but especially book 4, I think, is my new favorite in the series.
It's always good to love the latest. It's neat as a writer to just see your own evolution where God is calling you to tell his story in such creative and beautiful ways. Tell us just a little bit more about what's special to you about The Merchant's Curse. What was your inspiration? Just tell us what you're excited about.
Sure. Yeah. What I've tried to do with the whole series is, I wrote it to kind of have a Harry Potter kind of a vibe. But it's not fantasy, it's historical fiction. But because there's always this potentially supernatural element in the books, it kind of feels like it reads for kids, teenagers, really 10 and up, high school, middle school. It really reads more like that kind of a fantasy book. But in fact, what the kids are seeing is they're getting this history and they're getting good family values and religious themes. It's a coming of age series, really, about what does God want, me to do in my life, whether it's Zan, Lucy, or Christina. And then each book takes its own theme. So like book 1 was about suffering and death and, why do bad things happen to good people, that kind of thing. Book 2 is about forgiveness. Book 3 is about pride. So book 4 is about vanity. And one of the reasons it's my favorite book in the series so far is that it focuses on the book of Ecclesiastes, is where I drew all of the wisdom that I put into this book. Essentially, Zan is studying the book of Ecclesiastes and he's seeking wisdom. And as you know, I'm sure having read Ecclesiastes, this is the book where King Solomon, or not really King Solomon, but kind of King Solomon is talking about how all the things in this world are chasing after wind if you're just seeking them for themselves, including wisdom. And so Zan thinks, I want to be the wisest, kid out there, solve all these cool mysteries. And he has to kind of learn that, even that is a vanity when sought after for its own sake. And I really liked the book of Ecclesiastes. So, I had seen a movie once where they'd sort of taken themes from Ecclesiastes and put it into this movie. It was a Christian, actually, I think it was a romance country movie or something, but I just thought that's so beautiful. I'd love to do that with one of my Harwood Mysteries books. So that's sort of what I've done in the background of, checking out witches and running from the king's men. You kind of have this, theme that's coming out in the dialogue, in, what he's reading and some of the, just some of the narrative. And really, it's the book of Ecclesiastes and all the wisdom in that book is sort of worked through the pages of the novel. So in some ways, that's probably one of the reasons I like it, is kind of naturally presents what I think is a really important lesson for us, to focus on the life to come and not to get so wrapped up in the vanities of this world.
Yes. And I'd just like to say, Tony, for all the parents listening and grandparents too, that these books uphold the beliefs and the values of our Catholic faith, that you need not worry that the dark themes, which we find in the Chronicles of Narnia and The Hobbit and all these great works of literature for children, which are so often enjoyed as these are by adults, that it is the acknowledgement of darkness in the world and this childlike wonder and discovery of faith that is at the forefront. So you needn't worry that these books are too dark for your children. They're really not. They're lovely.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that. And I will say they all have the Catholic Writers Guild seal of approval. They're also all accepted by CatholicTeenBooks.com, which if your listeners don't know about that website, they should check it out because there's a lot of great authors writing for teens. CatholicTeenBooks.com. They don't take anything if it's against the faith, and that for sure. But I was doing a talk to some teachers at Catholic schools, and a Catholic school principal, when they heard me talking about the Merchant's Curse, asked, "So is this a book about witchcraft or what's going on?" And I had to explain. I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's worth explaining that although there's like this potential supernatural element in all these books, the reality is the books are very much grounded in this is like historical, real world people just encountering things that appear to be of supernatural origin. Sometimes the only real supernaturalness they're going to find in these books are the power of God. But each of the books, because they deal with kind of a different thing, I like to have conversations. So like in book 2, which was like this haunted cathedral, Zan, the main character, talks to brother Andrew about, you don't say anything about ghosts, but you believe in saints, and aren't saints supposed to be dead people that, we are in communion with, and so you have that kind of discussion. Book 4's discussion is kind of a little bit about, witches. What does this deal with witches? And I actually have the priest in that book go back to the story of King Saul and the witch of Endor. I don't know if you remember this from the book of Samuel, but King Saul consults a witch, and she conjures up the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who then predicts King Saul's death on the battlefield the next day, which is what happens. And so even though, the books are really not supernatural, they do acknowledge that even the scriptures and the church, recognizes there is evil in the world. And, this is a thing that, evil does exist. But you're, like you said, the books try to, although they skirt around some dark themes, they ultimately are stories that are very suitable for middle school and high school kids, and they very much have a redemptive theme to them, and are filled with hopefully enough levity so that the darkness is never really dark.
Yeah, and one thing too, before we go to our sponsor break, is that you are really good. I love it. So refreshing at capturing a little bit of the mind of a child. I love that I get to step into this world of the child, that sense of wonder and discovery. And I'll let you comment on that when we come back, Antony, or Tony, I should say, because we just got to take a second here for our wonderful sponsors to have a word with us. We will be right back.
Hi, I'm Walter Crawford.
And I'm Maureen Whitman.
We are the co-founders of homeschoolconnections.com and proud sponsors of the Homeschooling Saints podcast,
which is here to help you homeschool more joyfully, more easily, and more effectively.
We want to thank you for listening.
And we invite you to check out our courses at homeschoolconnections.com.
And now, back to our program.
So we're back with Tony Kolenc, and we're talking about the Harwood Mysteries and his new book, The Merchant's Curse. So take us back into where we were just kind of landing there, Tony.
Into the mind of a child, or as my wife would say, I'm a man child. No, she doesn't actually say that, but I think she thinks that. No, I still in some ways can very much, remember what it's like to think like a 12-year-old boy or something. So, I do try to capture that voice. And, and not just for boys either, right? I actually have written two fairly strong, significant girl characters into this. So I always like to emphasize, parents and grandparents, sure, get this book for your teenage boys, but get it for your teenage girls too. Because there's a little bit of a sweet romance. And actually, now that Christina's in the mix, there's a little bit of a love triangle going on here because, Zan has a crush on Lucy. But Lucy wants to become a nun, and we see that in book 3. And now in book 4, like, Zan has left and he's back in Lincoln with Christina, who's a much more worldly girl. And she's very feisty and puts him in his place a lot. So I actually think Christina might be my favorite character because she she really makes Zan be kind of a little bit of a bumbling teenager when he's around her. And she never seems to lack for good one-liners when they're needed. So there's a good balance actually between Lucy and Christina. And you may know this, I don't know if you do. I've actually written a series of Lucy short stories that are available. I'm giving one of them away free on my website, but I wanted to kind of explore her character a little bit more than what they get in the series. So I've teamed up a little bit with Catholic Teen Books on that because they put out these anthologies. So one of her short stories was in the Treasures anthology, and now Ashes is coming out in February. And a new Lucy short story will be coming out in February. And then I have like a standalone short story. And I hope to write probably about five Lucy short stories and then come up with like a Lucy anthology. So this is definitely not just for your boy readers out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I want to come back to something else too, which is the storytelling. You're a good storyteller, and that's so refreshing because I touched on it earlier, but there's no forced Catholicism in them. It's a time in the world and a place where Catholicism is a natural thing. It's really there. It's in the air that they breathe and in the way that they live and the way even that they ask questions. It's very beautiful and intentional on your part, but it never weighs down the story. So say a little bit about how you handle that and the kinds of lessons that emerge from this book that might be great conversations to have with our kids.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you. I really appreciate it. Oh, this is my wife tells me I get a big head. People like you complimenting me so much. But, the books, they take place in 12th century England. So they're, a good 300 years before the Protestant Reformation. And for that reason, they really are Christian. And I know that the Orthodox Christians were there too, but this is Western Christianity. They are Christianity. And frankly, I think, Catholic or non-Catholic, they should enjoy the books because, like you said, they're set in a historical setting. And so if you're at an abbey and around monks and nuns, you're going to be hearing about religion. You're going to be seeing prayers. Because it's just the lifestyle. Plus, the other reason I really like setting it in this 12th century England is because nowadays, all you see in our kids' books, especially, but everywhere now, is a total divorce of our faith from the rest of our lives. Like you watch TV, you would think nobody ever went to church, nobody ever knew a priest or a pastor, nobody ever, and if they did, it was probably because they were bad priests or pastors. Those are the ones that we see. And it's almost as if none of us ever think of God, none of us ever pray, none of us ever struggle with faith. And that we all know, maybe that's true for some people, but the reality is that's not true for most people. And by putting it in a 12th century environment surrounded by kind of religious situations, it really brings us back to the way our lives should be. Like we should be thinking about prayer and thinking about what does God want to do in my life. And, those are things that are conversations people just had. And, and that doesn't mean that my characters are somehow some holier than thou characters. Lucy's pretty holy, but Zan, as you know, has plenty of struggles with his faith. And I try to write those to have like human characters too. Like I don't want this to be sugar sweet, saccharine, because that's not the reality that the world is. It wasn't there's some harsh things in the world too, and kids have to deal with some harsh lessons too. So I kind of try to capture, putting all of that into a story that is meant for teens is kind of tough to do. Loyola really helped with their editing to, I think, keep me on the right track. And I'm glad when I hear people like you say that maybe I achieved what I was hoping for, but that's what I was going for. I wanted a great environment that would have great messages, but it would be organic and just fun storytelling, and that kids would just enjoy the stories. And I've got several kids that I know who've read it who are not at all religious kids, and still they don't seem to be put off by the religion in it at all, because it's just part of the story.
So with this sense of being welcomed into a story that anybody can access, I love that there is a curriculum companion that Loyola has for the series, which is wonderful. You want that for homeschooling families, for families that are doing book clubs or anything like that, where you really want to take people through something together. But we don't want to disturb the momentum of the story or get us thinking in the wrong ways about it so that we disrupt that enjoyment for the child reading the book. Would you just say a little bit about how our homeschool families can possibly leverage all the goodies in these, the faith, the history, the geography, so many things, even architecture and so much that's in these, but without slowing the momentum of the mystery, without kind of messing with the fun.
Right, exactly. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'll tell you a secret, since you just got your homeschoolers online. I wrote this book for homeschooling families. I mean, we were homeschooling when I started writing this series. My kids are all older now, so they're not. But I still write, for Homeschooling Magazine. And frankly, I'd love to come talk to some homeschooling groups, just like I'd like to talk to, school, Catholic school classrooms and that kind of thing. And I just did a webinar actually with Loyola on this. You're talking about Loyola support. We did a whole webinar with a whole bunch of teachers and principals you can find on Loyola's website about how do you enrich your curriculum with Catholic fiction. And I basically just did like an hour answer to your question, which is there's so many ways that you can take a book like this and a series like this, and especially Shadow in the Dark, which really does all the world building of medieval England, and build it into your kids' homeschool curriculum. They learn about monasticism, they learn about the feudal system, they learn about, the church and state struggle between the king and the pope. This is building up to the Third Crusade. 1187 is going to be the end of my book 5 with the fall of Jerusalem. So they learn about Saladin, and they're going to hear, as the series will go on, they'll hear to see King Richard the Lionheart that we all hear about. There's so much you can do, and Loyola has put together these great curriculum companions. The books themselves have glossaries, vocabulary. There's sections that talk about how to read historical fiction. There's discussion questions. Like Loyola really designed this so that it would be, ready to be used by homeschooling families, by Catholic teachers, Christian teachers, frankly. But really, my heart was with the homeschoolers as I started writing the series. And I was thinking, as a homeschooler, what kind of book series would I want to give my kids instead of Harry Potter? So that's what I wrote, So hopefully, that is what it achieves. And it's just a matter of getting it in the hands of, the people I wrote it for.
Wow. Fabulous. Fabulous. So we're so glad that our beautiful audience, which is incredibly diverse, it's in over 80 countries around the world, praise the Lord, that they really are accessing, what you're sharing, and it's so good. Tell us about the next project. You said you've already got a manuscript in with Loyola for the next one.
Yes,
so let's hear a little sneak preview.
Yes, Loyola is editing book 5, which I don't know what the title will ultimately be, but it's a murder mystery. In book 5, Zan and Christina return to Harwood Abbey, where Lucy is now in the nunnery. So it gets really fun. And there's a murder at the manor nearby. And basically, Zan, of course, has to wind up figuring out who the murderer is. And there's all this other stuff going on, too. But and it very much picks up where book 4 ends. in a pretty strong way, especially with Christina. And so book 5 really gives Christina some more good spotlight, because there's something that happens in book 4 that she has to kind of cope with. And like I said, book 6, which I haven't started writing yet, but I've started mapping out. And I think Loyola we're on the verge of signing the contract for book 6. Book 6 is actually going to take Zan closer to the Holy Land, because we're just about at the Third Crusade. So we're really going to bring him out of the Abbey now. And he's going to be on a ship. Let's just say he's leaving England in book 6. So I'm excited about the potential for that, because I always knew I wanted this to be a series that would ultimately end in the Third Crusade. And I've dropped hints all throughout the other books. This is coming, the Third Crusade, Jerusalem is going to fall, things are going bad in the Holy Land. There's all these little hints that I've been hinting at since book 1, because I knew this is the big historical event that I was, building up to.
Wow, that's exciting. I love your excitement and your passion for history. It's just infectious, and it really does bring some of the energy and just the delight in the stories. So as we're just wrapping up, Tony, anything else that's on your mind to share with the moms and dads and grandparents and guardians and people out there just listening with interest to, wow, this is a really interesting connection between our faith, our learning, our children's well-being? What would you like to leave us with as a dad, as a writer?
Well, honestly, we haven't mentioned this yet, but along the same lines as why I wrote these books is also why I've been doing this Shepherd's Pie podcast, which you were a guest on last season. As you know, we try to focus. It's really meant for parents and grandparents and teachers, but we try to focus on issues that impact youth. And it's kind of got the same feel. It's this idea that, kids today, there's a lot that they're dealing with, and there's enough challenges out there. So the more resources we can give them, the more books like, this series and Catholic Teen Books series and things like that, the more your life coaching, that we talked about. Like, there's so many things out there that we really, need to help them with. And there's only so much we can do as a parent. I'm a grandparent too. There's only so much we can do. So I feel like, we need to try to use these, resources and frankly, develop whatever we can to interest our kids so that they will be more responsive to, things of God. And it's hard to find those these days. So, that's why I wrote this, and that's why I do some of those things that I'm doing.
Yeah. So check out Tony's website, AntonyKolenc.com. And it's Antony the way it sounds, like Mark Antony. And Kolenc is Kolenc. So that's in the show notes. You can also find Loyola's curriculum companions to the Harwood Mysteries. We have the link there. We also have the link to Tony's podcast, The Shepherd's Pie. So much fun. Such a good podcast. Great conversations. And Catholic teen books as well. I also included the first episode that we did with Tony, episode 97, which is Homeschooling, Dad, Lawyer, and Mystery Author. It was so much fun introducing you to our audience back then, Tony, and fantastic having you back. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy teaching at Ave and you've got so many plates spinning. Really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you. And thank you for doing a podcast like this. I think this is exactly the kind of thing that homeschooling families need. So I appreciate you being there doing this.
All right. Thank you. God bless you, Tony. And everybody, thanks for listening. God bless you in your day and your walk with the Lord and your walk with the children that you're blessed to care for. We will be back again next week. Join us again. And thanks for being with us at Homeschooling Saints. Bye now. And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.